It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today our guest is CEO Aaron Caddel. Aaron is the 26-year-old behind brand darling Mr. Holmes Bakehouse. What started as a dream while renting out a closet in San Francisco in 2011 has grown into an international vehicle for food culture. Aaron moved to San Francisco in his teens due to driving restrictions placed on him shortly after a brain tumor diagnosis. He credits his success to an internal drive built from avoiding that reality. Aaron Caddel, welcome into the corner office.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Brent.
It's great to have you here. Well, you've got a very interesting story, as we were talking a little bit before the podcast. And what I'd like to do is just kind of start with your early years, because it sounds like that's might have really been setting the stage, obviously, for where you've gone to today. So tell us a little bit about that. Did you grow up in the Bay Area and then move back? Is that kind of your story?
No, I actually born and raised in Southern California, about maybe an hour and a half outside of Los Angeles, and kind of a smaller town. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I had too much of a vision for what I wanted to do with life, but it changed quite quickly from month to month with some, I guess, lots of fleeting ambitions.
Yeah. Well, what were those early years like? Were you kind of an entrepreneur from the word go, have the paperwork, do the sales at Christmas time, or what was kind of the things that you got involved with as a kid?
Yeah, well, I loved music. I think that there was points when looking back, I think that folks love to draw commonalities between like CEOs and entrepreneurs and things like that. And a lot of times I don't buy it, but I think in my case, if I were to point to one of those things, it was definitely buying large quantities of candy from Costco and selling it to kids at school as early as sixth grade. But yeah, something like that.
I love it. Did you repackage it, or was it just kind of put it in a brown paper bag and twice the price?
Yeah, no, it was pretty much just buying the quantity in bulk, and I'd be able to pretty much double or triple my price on it.
That's awesome. And was that kind of for special activities that you used the money for? You mentioned music. Was that one of your hobbies, or what did you typically do with the money you earned at that age?
Yeah, that's a great question. I more or less, like, I think my mother still to this day, my wife as well, they both quick to point out the fact that my interests are quickly changing from month to month. So at the time, it was everything from purchasing books on how to, chess theory to learning how to sew. I would just purchase all of the equipment that I would need, and within 2 months, I became, I guess, the level of proficiency that didn't mean I was good at it, but I became bored at it, and so I became bored with the subject, and I would move on to the next.
And were those hobbies, or were they things then again that you would turn around and sell?
No, I think pretty much all of them were just hobbies. Like I'd buy like climbing equipment and go out climbing and stuff. With music, I'd saved up and purchased a guitar, and definitely the food industries like always piqued my interest. In high school, my buddy Brad and I, he's the best man at my wedding, still my best friend to this day. But we would pretty much whatever we didn't go to. Paying for our car insurance and our cell phone bill, we would, pretty much drive out to Los Angeles on Friday night and go to Michelin star restaurants and use our money awfully. So But we just loved the experience. We'd go out and get wine as 17-year-old kids, and
Sure.
full meal.
Did you grow up in the San Fernando Valley, or were you outside LA city limits?
Yeah, outside of LA city limits, Redlands. It's
Redlands.
Golden
Okay.
Town in the Inland Empire.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up down in San Diego, so very familiar with that,
Yeah, yeah,
part of the
absolutely.
country and got fun. So what about your studies? Were you a good student? Top of the class, middle of the road, or ditch as often as you could?
It depends on the year that you're asking. I think until
Let's go back to junior high and elementary
yeah.
school. How'd you start out?
Yeah, I think I took school, pretty seriously, all probably through 10th grade. I think a lot of things changed when I got my driver's license. Like I vividly remember driving to school probably like 3 days after I was got my driver's license, and I just questioned myself. I was like, I can go anywhere that I want right now, and I'm driving
I'm
towards
driving to
school.
school.
Yeah. So I actually like took a U-turn and I drove away from school and didn't go to school that day. So that was probably the arc of the seriousness that I took education. Probably was up until that point.
So you mentioned music. What were some of your other outside hobbies?
I was super into theology, philosophy, and political theory.
Wow.
I actually that was
In high school.
yeah, in high school. And I think I ended up getting into a theology program as my first year in college. But the rest of my time was spent reading Nietzsche. Lots of guys like Thomas Hobbes and the Federalist Papers, going back to Rousseau, and lots of political theory.
Yeah, terrific. I just had the privilege of seeing Hamilton for the second time. And, the Federalist Papers, of course, starred brightly with regards to how, the Constitution was won. Hamilton was an amazing man, but the fact is that he wrote and wrote and wrote like no one's business. But those Federalist Papers, which were all written anonymously, which I had to kind of go back and scratch my brain and say, yeah, I knew that, but didn't realize he was the author behind it. So a lot of political theory then, was that kind of always of interest to you as well outside the classroom?
Yeah, I think so. It kind of started from philosophy, reading guys like Bentham and John Stuart Mill and like that, and Nietzsche as well. Yeah, a lot of gentlemen who ended up making a sizable impact, I think, on the way that we look at how we organize human behavior, like through like society and politics.
And it's interesting that you mentioned theology, because you don't normally always think about, political discipline being aligned with that, separation of church and state and all that. So was that, something that you pursued just because of that level of separation over the years and decades, or was it just kind of a dual interest in those two areas?
Yeah, I would say a dual interest. I maybe there is like a number of ways that they've interacted in my head as far as my interest in them. Of course, but I don't know. I still consider myself a religious individual. It's a piece that I was pretty excited about studying, and but in general, I would just kind of, I guess I would, I've done this in the past, but I kind of self-identify myself as more of an engineer than anything. And part of that kind of mindset is just I really enjoy the process of learning. And if there's an intricate system that can be understood, then I think that it's fascinating for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, cool. Any work during your high school years? Any part-time stuff that you did to pay the bills, put gas in the car,
Yeah.
fund those U-turns?
Yeah, no. So there's my first job was working at it was called the America's First Twin Kitchen, was and it's basically burgers and Mexican food, and that was
Ah,
Baker's Burgers, and I to this day it's still probably my favorite fast food place, and
is it still around?
yes, no, it totally is. It's still around. I'm a young guy,
Wow.
so most things that were around while I was in high school are still around.
I just have never heard of it. Is it a California or a Redlands phenomena?
Yeah, I mean, it came up at the same time as Del Taco, McDonald's.
Yeah,
Like all those guys are kind of in the same network, and
right.
this one just ended up staying like a local phenomenon.
Yeah. They all kind of came from the same area too. I think
Yeah,
McDonald's brothers were in California, weren't they? So
yep,
Inland Empire,
exactly,
maybe a little further north. Yeah.
totally.
Awesome. So those were, kind of your self-funding years leading up to college, and you'd mentioned, you studied theology and went on to college. Where did you go to college, and what were some of the ideas or the motivations around the decisions for that you made to go to college?
Yeah, so I was reading lots. I was skipping a lot of school and reading a lot of books, which is
Yeah,
kind of an
yeah,
interesting combination. But
right.
kind of that youthful and a little bit immature, rebellious nature. So that thing that I think that I still have not been able to shake. But I acknowledge it, so I think that makes it a little bit better, I guess. And but it's that mixed with just like a very thorough interest in studying, and so
Mm,
that piece really just meant that I was ditching school. I think my senior year, I ended up missing over 50 classes, and that not 50 days, but 50 classes, and
yeah,
what
yeah.
that ended up translating to just me going straight to the coffee shop and just opening a number of books. So that's where a lot of my time and my money went to
In your studies.
was that exactly. And so by the time that I got towards the end of my senior year, um, I ended up getting I guess I applied to a theology program at a Christian university in the United States, I guess in California, called CBU. And it was a full ride. They paid for everything to kind of go
Wow.
through this program. And then by the end of the first year, it definitely was not for me. And so that's something that I quickly exited from, and more or less tried to make a move into engineering. And so yeah, that's more or less. I at that point I kind of pulled back. I was working full time, and so I went to community college. I think that was kind of the peak of the point where I was I guess, interested in political theory. And then I kind of got into the Cal State system. I switched my major over to Arabic, and this is where stuff got interesting. So
Wow.
I was
Wow.
the reason I was studying Arabic, and like I swear everyone thinks this is a joke, but it was not, and this is really how idealistic I think that I am. Is I it was probably within weeks of watching the Jason Bourne series like back to
Ah,
back,
sure.
and I was like,
Yeah.
this is amazing. Like
I want to be a spy.
yeah, exactly. And so I found a program that if I like go through it and I'm at the top of my class, and like I tend to think of myself as like pretty good at school when I attend, right? And I pretty much I was like, I can go to the top of this class, and every single I guess I think it was 80% of the kids that went through this program ended up getting drafted by special forces, the
Yeah.
CIA, the FBI, and of course at this time it was like super hot, like for individuals who were able to be proficient in Arabic. So,
Yeah.
you know what?
Yeah.
I went for it, and I think I was 3 weeks in, and that's when everything kind of crashed down.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to that in a minute, but I want to get a little bit of a deeper background. So, mom and dad obviously, had an influence on you. What did they do, and what their careers, and how family life, brothers and sisters? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've my mother, bless her heart, is a stay-at-home mom,
Right.
and like that, it was impactful to the company. I mean, to the to the family, in
Right.
in so many ways to make that decision, both from a financial perspective and also really just from like kind of growing up as somebody who was able to have kind of a full-time parent that was kind of at home.
Was was
No doubt.
mama was mama grad? Was she a college grad?
No, neither of my parents went through college. And yeah, so she spent, I guess, was full time raising my sister and I. My half brother, he was already out of the house by that point, and so it's just kind of her, my sister and I, and more or less, like I have no doubt that kind of part of the confidence like that is instilled within kids undoubtedly like comes from like the support of their parents, and it doesn't always have to look like this, but I think that that's as I've like actually grown up, it's been the piece that I think that I've appreciated more than anything. Like has been that, and then with my father, he's been in construction his entire life. Just yeah, exactly, and like now he's kind of working like in wastewater management for the city of San Bernardino. But he's really just one of those salt of the earth type of individuals. Like absolutely, like I would say that the person that I would refer to Yeah, for probably for the rest of life, as far as like the definition of a great work ethic, as well as just the pinnacle of what it means to be a good human.
And sis is a year or two younger, older.
Yeah, 2 years older, and she is yeah. Right now, she's wrapping up her master's in speech pathology, and like her pretty much her entire purpose in life is to help people. So I think I don't know for whatever reason, like my parents did a pretty great job, just like fostering I think a good yeah, just did a great job at
Well, they must have
instilling the
instilled,
values.
yeah, an interest in education, and you're obviously deep, book reading and so forth, and yet not being college grads themselves. Did it come from them? Were they encouraging to that, or was it, more of a kind of a a DNA issue that you might have come across, or did they really foster learning and education, bettering yourself, I guess, so to speak?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can truthfully answer that one way or another. Um, but I can say like I did Boy Scouts for a few years when I was a kid, and
Right,
I vividly remember my dad just being this perfectionist, right? And like we'd be building these like carts to roll down a hill with, like with all the rest of the team and things like that. And before you know it, he's just like he's up until like 1 a.m. Perfecting this like cart with me, like in the garage,
right,
like teaching me how
right.
to like do it exactly right. And so as far as education though, like he definitely is more of a self learner. And yeah, I don't know. I think that in general, there's a curiosity that is in the family, but not necessarily a prioritization of education per se.
It's interesting that you say curiosity. And, Aaron, when we were talking before, I was telling you about, we've done enough of these where there's been some common threads, right? Among some successful, CEOs, the successful CEOs we've been speaking to. And curiosity is something that's mentioned very often. How did that play out for you? I mean, did you find that even as a kid, is that what kind of spurred on your interest in the reading that you did? And, the U-turns as well as the entrepreneurial activities of going to Costco and getting the bag of candy? How did it play out for you? And what are your earliest memories of what curiosity meant in your life?
That's a great question. I would say in general, I mean, without before getting into any specifics, it was definitely like the overarching theme here. I think curiosity is a good way to describe it. I think a better way to describe it, perhaps, is just like I just needed to break the rules.
Mm.
It was like a
Interesting.
need in me to like when I saw something that didn't seem to work correctly, for whatever reason, or maybe I was just hyper like judgmental about like the way that the world like really spun, or maybe it was just pure curiosity. But like I think that it just caused me to get head like just knee deep into problem solving. And to this day, I would say that the most fulfilling thing, it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the products that we make, though I take so much pride in them and I love them. It's not necessarily, the customer experience that's occurring right there. It's like, it's actually every single problem that we come across as a business that we have to solve. It's the problem that I get stuck in front of a whiteboard until 3 a.m. in the morning. I forget to sleep. I realize I haven't eaten anything all day, and like I'm just so in I think I'm just enthralled with the idea of
Engaged.
like
Yeah.
solving a problem. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And it sounds like dad was a little bit that way too. I mean, staying up
yeah,
until
absolutely.
late at night, getting that trained in. Yeah. So a little bit of nurturing there. Yeah. Cool. And so, jobs you obviously worked during college. Again, was it more kind of part-time things prior to, the big change, or any work there that was related to the food industry, for example, where you ended up?
Yeah, I got super into coffee. So after my job at Baker's, I just took a job at a coffee shop, and I was able to make more money, just being able to make tips, and
Right. Sure.
that more or less was something that I found could be codified as well, which is exciting. Everything
Right.
from at the time it was actually the cinnamon challenge. I don't know if you remember that, but essentially you like challenge is like, is it possible for a human being to like swallow a spoonful of cinnamon? And so, like, on top of great customer service, of course, like I wanted to make sure I
Right.
connect with all my, like all of our customers. But I would tell them that, essentially, like, look, if I can do the cinnamon challenge, then you're going to put $20 in the tip jar. If not, I'm going to personally buy your drink. I would get people
Oh,
doing it
that's
every
great.
day.
That's
Yeah, which
great.
is great. So that was a lovely move. And I think the love that I've had for food, that I would make at home and things like that. It kind of got transferred and channeled into like making coffee. At that point, I started just to get competitive with it, and kind of going to competitions and things like that.
Yeah. Good fun. Good fun. So a little money on the side, but also it sounds like they were challenging things that kind of, got other people challenged and excited. Was there, what else was going on there, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Was it kind of not just focused on, financing your vices, the other things you pursued, or was it, was there an engagement factor? Was there something about those types of challenges that you liked from kind of an intrinsic standpoint?
Yeah, I would say I think it would be from an intrinsic standpoint.
Yeah.
I wasn't using anything as a goal to something else at that point in
Yeah.
time.
Right.
It really was just an enjoyment of mastering something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ultimately, whether that was studying thoroughly, uh, you know, the political theory, if it was like getting into some, philosophical train of thought, or if it was just
Right.
like becoming really good at coffee, or something super stupid, like I'm going to like do the cinnamon challenge and I'm going to get
Right.
paid for
Right.
it somehow, like I think that was I think it was just problem solving that I enjoyed.
That's awesome. And you mentioned the Cal State system. Living at home during that period of time, then, or did you actually have some on-campus experience during those years?
Oh no, I moved out when I was 17,
Okay,
and that wasn't because of friction in the house. I just been
you're
a
ready.
very, yeah, exactly. I think I took a lot of pride from very early on that, like, look, my parents aren't going to pay for anything. I'm not going to live at the house and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I was living in Riverside, going to school in San
Sure.
Bernardino and then working
Yeah.
in Redlands.
Right. Well, let's get to kind of that life-changing event. Tell us a little bit about the period leading up to that. Were there some symptoms that you kind of began to experience, and kind of were sometimes as people are confounded by what might have been going on with you? Tell us a little bit about those times right up leading to your diagnosis.
So it's really everything started with when I was playing with my band at a talent show for my high school, and I was playing guitar and vocals, and I think we were doing a pretty good job. And I'm just super nervous, like got tons of nerves, and we get started with one of our songs, and all of a sudden, like my hand just stops working, like it starts clenching up, and at the time, like I'm just frustrated more than anything. I'm not like scared or anything. I'm just like, I have to play this song. And so like my bandmates are like looking over at me, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just like pointing at my like arm. And so I dropped my pick, and like, it's just kind of just frustrating. And so anyway, that ended up leading to,
And how long did that last? Was that just like a 5 minute, event, or had it gone
no,
on for a long time?
yeah, much shorter actually.
Yeah,
It would go
minutes.
on for probably, no, it would probably last for about like 10 to 15 seconds,
Wow,
right?
real quick. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so those were just very small things, and I didn't think anything of it, so I didn't go to the doctor or anything. And then at a later point in life, I was in a different band. Sorry, by a later point in life, I mean like probably like a year later, so like 11th grade maybe. And I was playing a show that was in a few cities over, and I get up on stage, and we just were starting our second song, and the thing starts happening to my hand again, and I'm just like, oh great. And then before you know it, like I just feel electrocution start going through my entire body, right? And so my arm, it just starts flailing and kind of going out of control. I'm at this point, I'm actually embarrassed, and I just feel my upper body give out. I hit the floor, and then I wake up, and I
So
don't know
it was
how
a
long.
full seizure.
Yeah, it was a full seizure, so blacking out, and I opened
And
my
this is
eyes.
this is still high school, or are we in college now?
No, this is high school. This
Still
is
high
the
school.
first time that I had a seizure,
Yeah.
like a full-on seizure, and so Yeah, when I wake up, the paramedics are in front of my face and they're asking me a series of questions, including what year it is and all these questions that apparently I just answered all of them wrong. But when I get up, I just, they lift me up and they take me out and, they wheel me out. And I just remember there's just like all these like girls in corners and
Oh
like everybody
gosh.
just kind of like crying and stuff. And like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
Like what just happened? And so they do an
So it was
MRI.
more kind of disbelief, not embarrassment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, well,
Just didn't a blackout. Yeah. Didn't know what
sure.
happened. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
I mean, I knew that I felt this electrocution. I started moving involuntarily. So,
Right. Right.
but they did an MRI. They didn't find anything, and ultimately, they didn't not find anything. They missed something that
Mm,
ultimately from today, I think anybody would actually be able to spot the tumor.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
we ultimately just kind of the doctor calls a meeting with me and just lets me know like, look, this is pretty normal. Like or ultimately this is something we're expecting you to grow out of and give us some time and by the time you turn 18 you're probably not going to have any of this and I was like all right, that sounds great. So I took him at face value and just kept on moving on with life. And I would have these focal seizures, those little small ones with my hand that I was talked about the
Mm,
first time, and they would just happen. They became happening more frequently,
yeah. Yeah.
and so that's kind of ultimately what led to me post high school when I was in my in studying Arabic at that point, working
Yeah.
at a coffee
Right.
shop and
Hoping to
living
join
in
the CIA.
right, exactly. And I was at work, making coffee,
Yeah.
and we're in the middle of a rush, and I was working with one other person, and I enjoyed the rushes. They were fun,
Right.
exhilarating, a little bit
Sure.
of an adrenaline rush,
Yeah. Yeah.
and 18 or 19-year-old, yeah, I was nine. I think I just turned 19. 19-year-old Aaron just pretty much hit the floor and blacked out, and I wake up and my coworker's lap, just like, and everybody's crying again, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's just, and this time I actually know what happened, and and I'm
This was
also
like kind
like,
of
all
the
right,
second largest seizure then because you didn't have
right.
any. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Got it.
And so this time they pull me in, and my doctor, makes the decision that I've got to lose my license, my driver's license, because of seizures, which isn't fun, especially for somebody who's
19
operating
years old.
between,
Yeah.
yeah, and operating between three cities in Southern California.
Sure. Working as well. Yeah. Going to school.
But and then on top of that is I get a terminal diagnosis, which
Mm.
isn't fun either. And so he pretty much gives me, at best until 30 years old to live, to try to avoid surgery as long as possible, as it's something that would paralyze the right side of my body, potentially leave my arm just constantly
So
restricted.
back up, Aaron. Did they do another MRI and then finally discover the
Yeah,
tumor? So
yes, they did
okay.
another
So
MRI.
so after the second seizure, they obviously knew they missed something, right? So they went back and found the tumor.
Exactly.
Got it. Got it. Wow. But inoperable.
Well, it's operable. It's just incredibly dangerous, and so it's the tumor's located right next to my primary motor cortex, and so they were like, "Look, if you can postpone having this surgery as long as possible, we would recommend it." They another piece that especially had frustrated me about that conversation was his description of my ability to speak, and so my brain would be functioning normal, but the coordination between the muscles in my face are at high risk, and so I might not be able to actually speak, at least for. I could potentially go through therapy and see what could be recovered. And
And that
so,
was a diagnosis for more of a gradual degrading. Was that kind of what they had expected, or was it something they felt that would happen quite soon? Because it's obviously been several years, but
right, right. No, it would be from the surgery, is what they
oh,
were
from the
saying.
surgery. I'm sorry. Okay, got it, got it, got it. Yeah.
And so ultimately, this was it. It was like, look, so you're dying, and you want to postpone this surgery as long as possible, and you need surgery in order to extend the lifeline. Um, and so you're kind of put between a little bit. You're kind of between second and third base, and
Wow, wow.
definitely in a pickle.
How did your faith come into action at that time, if it did? Was there kind of a moment? Was there a pause? Was there going back to, some of your beliefs in terms of, wow, God, what's this about? Was there a moment there?
I don't claim to understand at all how God interacts with the world. I think it's something that's quite confusing. Even for this, I think those of strongest faith in whatever it is that you believe, there's a lot that I think is left up to wonder. But one thing that I would say that definitely at this time, that I there was nothing that I would ascribe to being somebody else's fault. That the natural order, more or less, like this is the way that my cards have been
Word
dealt.
belt. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I
Interesting.
think that rather than any form of anger or any form of sadness or things like that, it was more or less like I have a series of decisions to make before I stop making decisions altogether. And what that means is like, get on your feet and start building a game plan.
So did you go forward with the surgery?
No, I did not
Got it. Okay.
at the
And
time.
at the time, right. So drugs were prescribed, or how did they deal with, the seizures, or was there any, short term?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I actually still take seizure medicine to this day,
Right.
which I don't necessarily need to. We'll get to that point, but
Yeah.
essentially, I'm not supposed to operate anything for the course of 6 months while I come down off of the medication. So
Right.
I
Right.
just haven't had the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was given medication and removed my driver's license and more or less trying to figure out where the next where do I need to be in order for me to be
Yeah.
functioning human being and get something done with life.
Did you leave school then? Tell us about the path from that point forward.
Oh, it was super quick. So I after this diagnosis and such, I just wasn't going to school. I was like, all right, this is invaluable entirely.
That's kind of predictable, Aaron.
Right.
It's on your history. I can see that U-turn coming.
Exactly. The first thing to go was education. But I mean, like, you got
wasn't
it.
as important anymore.
Exactly. It just didn't fit within the timeline that I was
right.
kind of restricted to.
Right,
And so it would be completely meaningless for me to spend another 3 years inside of in an Arabic program,
right.
just to lead towards, the end of my life. So
Any regrets about that?
no, not at all. There's been so much, introspection that I think that my entire generation has been doing about the value of, secondary education as a whole.
Right, right.
And definitely, like those feelings for sure resonate with me, and especially given the just the business that I'm currently in, which is blue collar work.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk about that stuff at some point today.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Great. So let's, mid fast forward here. You set a new path. What was that? And, how did you take those steps from that point forward?
Yeah. Well, rather than, again, rather than kind of being at a point of despair or, kind of imploding, emotionally or something like that, I think that there's just something in my brain that just turned off. That point in your brain where you're just like, hey, bro, like, let's check these feelings out. And that part just was not there. More or less, like I realized that I had a very limited quantity of time. I had a very limited amount of time to like actually be conscious, and what that meant for me is I have a lot of shit to get done.
Right, right. So you got your bucket list together, literally, right?
Something like that. I didn't necessarily know what it meant, but more or less, I went up to visit my brother in San Francisco. While I was there, I was at a coffee shop, and just figuring out what the heck do I do like with the rest of my life, and I'm there enjoying myself, and the manager there, I is somebody that I knew, and I asked him about openings, and he just told me, he was like, well, I have an opening right now. Somebody didn't show up, so if you want the job, it's 5 days a week, and you can take it as long as you can start today. So I did.
Wow.
I started the job right there on the trip up to San Francisco, which was a week after I had got diagnosed.
Wow.
And but I had something else to work out, which is a place to live. And
Yeah.
so I asked him if he had a place to live, and he said, I have a closet. And so I literally moved into his closet. And that's really where I spent the first months in San Francisco. Was just inside of a closet, going back and forth from work, and at that point, building a game plan for what the rest of my life would look like.
Yeah, yeah, great. And again, it just sounded like you just kept moving forward, right? That's kind of the best way in which to kind of deal with tragedy and these types of things that impact you. Did you feel at any point in time, any helplessness, or were you just too busy figuring out, look, I've got a limited amount of time and I'm just going to go do it, figure out what that is?
There was nothing helpless about what was going on in my mind. Everything
Yeah.
was, this decision is either is going to have a higher or lesser ROI than anything else that's on the whiteboard, and I'm going to analyze which one is going to be the better decision.
And in making the decision not to have the surgery, was that something that, you involved your parents with? It doesn't sound like you're perhaps married at the time, but, was that a tough choice to make?
No, I don't think so. No, it was pretty easy. It life just looked a lot different. You mentioned time, and like how you would in how you essentially approach these things that we do on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of people, I think, when they go to work, for instance, they see the week as a 7-day cycle, right? It's like this. What I'm doing today is going to just happen again a week from now. For me, it immediately stopped being that. Like, time stopped being cyclical, and it ended up being, I am like, more or less, there's a fuse that just got lit, and I am right now, I have to sprint if I want to get accomplished something, which I just began defining while the fuse was going down the line.
Well, truly living one day at a time, I guess. Was that a good way to describe it? You kind of just said, I don't know how long that fuse is going to burn, but the fuse is lit. And, frankly, It's lit for all of us, but you just knew that you probably had a much shorter fuse on it. So you just got busy. Well, tell us about that. So you moved into the closet, and I know this is a special closet. We've talked about that before as well. How did this game plan play out? How did it develop?
Well, I was more, I was working as a barista, and it became very clear to me that like, this is not. I mean, it was never a point that I was analyzing it as something that would be a long-term play. It was while I was in school, and it was a trade that I was able to bring to San Francisco so that I could afford to live in a closet. And so I more or less was like, how can I take this thing that I'm actually pretty good at and turn it into a business? And so I went through. I basically went up to Haight Street, where the free love movement was in the 60s and 70s.
Haight Ashbury, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a failing chocolate shop, and they had a really nice espresso machine called an FB80. I saw that immediately, and the store was completely empty. I was like, I think this place is positioned wrong. And so I just spent every single day that I had after work there, just like on my computer. And I began just drafting a business plan. So I didn't have the contact information for the owner or anything, but the entire staff, they got to end up knowing me like over the course of like 2 weeks. And I had never done this before, but I pretty much had put together somewhat of a pitch that I would be able to provide to the owner once I got a hold of him, to let him know that I was going to take over his business and basically reposition it as a coffee shop, and retrain the staff, redo the interior, and some other things with a pretty cheap budget.
Bold.
And so
bold.
Yeah, well, I think like when you kind of have a death note, you don't really have a lot to lose, and so like I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I don't know whether I can attribute it to just being overly confident, or if it's just like that social pressures and social obligations in life, I think at that point just stopped being meaningful, and so it's kind of like a nothing to lose situation. But one thing led to another, and I got in front of him. We spent about 2 hours together, and we shook hands that same day. And more or less, I came in there, and it was very well received by the neighborhood, and it ended up turning into 2 locations within 6 months. And at that point, that's when I saw a very clear view into the pastry market.
Yeah. So that first business, what was that called?
That was Stanza.
Oh, that was Stanza. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just pretty much a coffee shop.
type of
Yes,
location. And got it, got it.
exactly.
And
And
that evolved.
well,
And
while that was happening, I was consulting for other coffee programs, in the city as well, just to make extra money. And so that was, I ended up building a number of relationships through that as well.
awesome. And so tell us a little bit about some of those early leadership lessons, because obviously at that time you were taking on staff and beginning to work with them. What did you kind of learn, from your earlier years, and what were you beginning to apply? Because you are now in a leadership position, right? And taking these folks and, you know, influencing and managing and directing their lives, at least their work lives. What were some of the key things that you learned during that period or applied during that period?
The first is that nobody knows what they're doing. That's definitely the first. I was 20 years old, and my business partner most definitely did not know that he was now in business with a 20-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So that was one piece. And as I began, learning how to run a business, as the biggest thing that I think that I've come to attain as somebody who owns a business today is the ability to do project management. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the ability
Mm-hmm.
to ship a product is far and away the most valuable asset that you can bring to the table. And getting into an executive level role, whether it's like an early stage startup or going into a middle market company, I can't really speak beyond those two things, but
Yeah. Right.
in those positions is being able to know what everyone needs to see in order to get not only an idea of what they're responsible for, but also a 10,000-foot view of what their job
Mm,
means to the larger picture.
yeah.
And that piece became very clear in lots of failed lessons as I'm dealing with very young people who may or may not show up to work, who end up showing up to work with, drunk or something like that. And
You're out of
it's
the first violin seat. Right? I mean, it's
right.
really a kind of a conductor's job, isn't it? Because you,
It's like it just I would say just as any other industry, and I'm not gonna say that they're all equally difficult or anything like that. Coffee shops, I would say, like it's much easier than what I'm currently doing today. But nonetheless, like everything is a matter of putting in place like systems to be able to operate under,
hmm.
and like the quality of your systems will dictate the quality probably of your company.
So would you say you're a process guy? Would that be a good description? In other words, you really think through what all those elements are, do them yourself, right? And kind of understand, the approaches to it, and then really just help your people along figuring out how they play the part in the bigger process. Is that a description that you would agree to, or is it a little different?
I would say that I'm learning how to do that every single day, but I think that I've become a lot better at it than when I first started.
Excellent. And what do you look for in people? I mean, you've now about 100 staff. What's your total staffing now with current initiative?
Yeah, I would think we're approaching 70.
Yeah.
But we are, the thing that I would say, at least within my immediate directs, right? Like my office team,
Right.
is I value so much more the ability to learn how to solve a problem than
Mm,
actually the knowledge itself to solve a problem. So if somebody has the experience in how to solve the exact problem I have, I think that you would be great as a consultant that I'll hire for probably 3 weeks, how long it takes to solve a problem. But what I'm looking for is the ability to attain the knowledge to solve a problem.
got it. And do you think curiosity comes into play there, as we talked about earlier? Do you look for that in others?
Yeah, I think curiosity plays a part. I would say perhaps even more than that is, I my entire team, they know that more or less like the most important thing inside of this company and like working with this team is taking direct pride in every deliverable that
Mm,
comes from your desk. And so, like I think the first day that anyone on my immediate team works, like I go out for coffee with them, perhaps a drink. And the conversation more or less starts with talking about how I don't care whether or not that they're working 30 hours a week or they're working 60 hours a week. That really just means that they're sitting in a chair for 30 or 60 hours. Like if they're at their computer for 40 hours that week, that just means they're literally sitting at a chair typing on, a keyboard. The only thing that their success and that they're going to be measured by come the next performance review, and whether they're going to be a right fit for the company is ultimately the quality of the deliverables that come from their desk. And the difference between people, it's not their experience. It actually, I don't think it even has to do with their raw intellect and things like that. It really is an amount of pride that they have in anything that they're going to be presenting to the company and the team. I think that everyone on my team has one main focus, and that's like, if they don't see that they've added value over the last week, then they need to reanalyze what their work focuses are.
Yeah. Well, pride's important. What about the other P? Do you look for passion? Is that important when you recruit and look for people in your organization?
Passion, I think passion's a little bit of a buzzword. The pride in themselves is a little bit, maybe, like, as I was talking about, perhaps is a better descriptor for what I'm perhaps looking for. It's something that we have like painted on the walls with our company values is impress yourself. It's a really important facet. I think that you can have passionate people under control and command and control systems.
Right.
And I think time has shown that doesn't work. I think that what people need is not a need to ultimately impress me or for the directs to, impress their supervisors. But ultimately, I think when they step into the job, to have clear expectations of what it means to meet the expectations of the job, and for them to feel the excitement and exhilaration of solving problems and presenting that to the rest of the team. And so recognition behind work inside of this company is it's a huge component, I think, of what we've built.
And if they don't have that pride of ownership, they're never going to have that either. Right?
I don't think so.
That's important. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Mr. Holmes. Now, you've been in that capacity. Is it 3 years now? How long has the operation been in its current state?
Yeah. I think it's been about 4 years.
4 years now. Yeah. Got it. So tell us about the evolution. How did you get from the closet to the Haight Street coffee shop to Mr. Holmes?
Right. Yeah. No. I had these coffee shops. I quickly began to realize that the margins within the product, it wasn't. At the time, I was 20 or 21 years old, making $70,000 a year, and to me that was great. It was awesome. But I'm not here like for the money, right? Like I want to build something, and I don't think the margins there supported the kind of growth patterns that I would be interested in building. I built the systems that I needed for 2 stores, but what does 10 stores look like? And so, ultimately I wanted either more complex systems, or I wanted way more money to be able to way more capital to build a lot more stores. And so with coffee, it's an overcrowded market. And what I saw very clearly as a coffee shop owner is the same thing that every other coffee shop owner sees inside of my industry, which is that we're all going for the same exact pastry providers, right? I mean, it's a simple equation, but you as the consumer, you just see better or worse pastries from coffee shop to coffee shop. But what you don't understand is that we're all going after the same guys. So we're getting on their waiting list in XYZ. And so after the process of getting on the wait list of the 2 companies that everybody in San Francisco had wanted to be on, I decided that I was going to drop that list and I was going to build my own company. And so, ultimately I, ended up over a lot of convincing. I convinced one of my baristas who had some baking experience to come on board and start baking with me. And so we were waking up, very early in the morning at like 3 a.m. Right. Yeah, and getting a bunch of muffins and scones and like none of the pastries that we currently serve today. And we were getting them out to everywhere to my 2 coffee shops at the time. And by the end of the first month, we had maxed out our production. With not just our 2 my coffee shops, but also a number of coffee shops throughout the city, and so that's kind of how the story began. Is pretty much reaching the pinnacle of production out of the facility that we were in at the time to renting out within the first month.
When did you kind of make that transition from saying this feels like candy from Costco? Right. Yeah. And I think I need to get out of the coffee business and get into the pastry business full time.
No, I mean, it was definitely an organic move, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like my fascination with food has been from such an early age. I
Right,
remember
right.
making like sourdough bread at 13 years old,
Wow.
like just thoroughly enjoying like a lot of this, the science and such behind like baking and everything. And so,
Right.
like, and not even baking, but just, cooking in general, not the food industry. So this was an organic move that I thoroughly enjoyed. But on top of that, before I ended up making the move into it, the way that I found out whether this business was viable or not is I went on to Google and I
Hmm.
just searched for random recipes. And I costed out these recipes by, checking out the Food for Less and trying to see what all the ingredients cost.
Sure.
And I was like, Jesus, this is like
This is a good
eggs,
margin.
flour, and sugar. Yeah.
All
And like,
basic stuff. Yeah.
oh, and I was so ignorant at the time, but it was great. And so I ultimately was like, look, this is a further level of complexity, an entire new like realm of systemization that I would be able to ultimately accomplish. And I think a business that would be like more or less like an endless black hole of problem solving.
Wow. Terrific. Well, it's been 5, 6 years now, I guess, since the full diagnosis and, the prognosis as well, right, with regards to what's going forward. How have you managed that over this time? Has it been something that, the medication is kind of kept in check? Have you had seizures that have gone on? Did you make a decision about any additional, surgery or how do you kind of face that day to day?
Yeah, we are. Okay. So in the operating agreement that I created, for the LLC as it originally was established, I put in a clause in there, and it pretty much was stating that with the people that were throwing in some money to, invest in us and such, that, I was going to be able to retain my equity in the case of death, like once I had this surgery. Like that essentially I would be able to get transferred over about, I think it was like 30% of the equity would be able to like remain to my family because I
Yeah.
just want to be
Right.
able to give them something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just this strong desire to give them something. And so, I, more or less I had planned from pretty early on, like I was going to try to get this company launched and go into surgery because I've got to make it happen.
Mm.
The seizures were becoming more and more frequent. I was having them, I recall having them while I was at work.
Oh.
A number of customers that now are looking at this business owner that's just like foaming out of the mouth and
Oh,
blacked
boy.
out. It wasn't wonderful.
Not conducive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and then on top of that, while I was riding my bike in the city, it became pretty messy.
Mm.
And it was a point where I think I was starting to get scared. And so I got ready to schedule my surgery. And at this point, I went through a great, fascinating doctor in Los Angeles. His name's Dr. Peichel. I don't think I've ever actually told him, but I think he saved my life. And he essentially performed a surgery on my brain, which I was awake for about 5 hours of the surgery.
Wow.
Yeah, which I
Was
actually
it a
remember so
removal
much of
or
it.
was more of a disablement of the tumor? How did it
Yeah, it was a removal.
removal? Got it. Okay.
It took out the tumor, and they're just having me perform a number of motor functions as I was having the surgery. My leg stopped working while it was happening, and so they started cutting around it. So minimally, I know for sure because I still remember them repeatedly asking me to move my leg, and me telling them I am.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So going over that after surgery as well. But I had some mild loss of function on the right side of my body for really just a few weeks after surgery. But if really he hadn't done surgery in the way that he did in keeping me awake, which I don't know how common it is now, but in 2014, like we were asking multiple doctors about this, and he ended up being the one that was able to do it.
Yeah.
And told me about it. So
Wow. Fantastic.
yeah, if it wasn't for that, the right side of my body would be trashed. I would be a quadriplegic, no
Wow.
doubt.
Wow.
They would have cut that part of my body out.
Because that's where the brain was sitting, or was sitting on the left side, I guess, that controls your right, right? Isn't that how it works?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. And that's I
Wow.
ended up
And
getting out of surgery.
successful removal. Fantastic.
But it turns out that even though I wasn't dying, it's still really difficult for a 22-year-old I think I was 22 at the time.
Yeah.
To raise the money that was needed for us to open our first retail shop. And so as ambitious as I was, and the amount of very amateur financial modeling that I became, good enough at to present to people at the time, they still weren't throwing their money at me. So
right.
I started building our first retail space, and I came up about $100,000 short. And that was a bummer because I'm still operating under with the kind of lifestyle that I'm dying. And so I make decisions, and ultimately, I bear the consequences of them later. So part of that was signing a lease before I actually had all the money to build out the space.
Right.
And so we were able to, build get the plumbing done, the electrical upgrade and things like that. But I didn't have enough money to buy the actual equipment. And so more or less, I actually didn't. I think that I got lucky, but I knew that I needed $100,000, and I wasn't going to be able to get it by going to the bank. I wasn't going to be able to get it. My family's not of wealth, and I think that I had tapped into pretty much every angel investor who would listen to a 22-year-old tell them why they should invest in a bakery. And so I pretty much just applied. I planned it out. I basically listed out all of the credit cards that were offering 0% interest for a course of 12 to 18 months. And I knew that I had to apply for them at the exact same time. So if I didn't apply for them altogether, my credit score would get updated and it would reject me for future credit. And so I had to apply for them all in the exact same night. I didn't sweat even a drop. I just was on the computer as if it was life or death.
Oh
and
my gosh!
More or
Did
less
you do the full 100,000 then in terms of the credit cards?
I got over
up to it.
Yeah, I got $100,000 in credit. And I just got the emails within the course of a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was, and in the mail just confirming, you've got $25,000 on this card. Here's $15,000 on this card. And all of them were 0% APR.
Oh, love it.
So I was able to open up a retail space, and I paid off every one of those credit cards within the first, I think, 3 or 4 months.
And kept the equity yourself. God bless you.
Yeah,
exactly. Fantastic. Great. And since the surgery, have you been on, additional medication? Has that helped you, deal with it? Or has it really been, now more in remission since that time?
Yeah, so, they did a biopsy. They had contradictory results in the beginning. They thought that, it was, malignant. Wait, what is it? Yeah, malignant. And, and thank God they sent it out to, I don't know where it is.
Another lab.
Yeah, it's a famous lab. It's on the East Coast, Minnesota or something like that.
Yeah, Mayo Clinic or something?
Yeah, Mayo Clinic. So
mm-hmm.
they sent it over to Mayo Clinic. I think at this point it was for a third opinion, because it was in the Kaiser system. Then it went over to UCLA, and then they sent part of my fucking brain out to Mayo Clinic.
All over the country to try and diagnose this thing.
No, exactly. But it ends up coming back that this very, very narrowly defined strain of a benign mass that was in my brain. And of course, it has the ability to come back, but it's not cancerous. And that means that I probably get to live over the age of 30.
Yeah. Fantastic. Wow.
I haven't had a seizure since. The right side of my body is completely recouped from the surgery merely weeks after.
Wow.
I was able to raise some money and risk going bankrupt with some credit cards. And
Fantastic. Well, what a story.
Trying to build a company.
There you go. And profitable today, or are you still relying on investment from the outside?
If we're asking a cash flow question, it depends on it depends on which month we're investing in what. Right? Exactly. Yeah. No, we're pushing pretty hard. We're excited about the deals that we're making, but if we were to sit back and stop moving forward on things, we'd be cash flow positive.
Aaron Caddel, once again, thank you. You've been very generous with your time, and thank you about telling us how you reached your corner office.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Brent.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.